This webinar is being recorded and is part of the Radio Club of America interview series. Good evening, Cheryl, and thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And so, and I do encourage all of our participants that are viewing with us tonight to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A area, and Barney will bring those questions up, and we'll pause for questions frequently. So please do that. Cheryl, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about your company and what's going on.
Hey, well, thank you so much. First, I really appreciate the invitation to come talk with everyone. It's a great honor. I know you've had a lot of great guests on here, so I hope I can share some interesting things. I'm Cheryl Giggetts. I am the principal consultant at CTA Consultants. We are a public safety consulting firm. We help jurisdictions, typically local jurisdictions, occasionally state, develop needs assessments and figure out what kind of radio system they need. They need a critical communication system so that their police and fire can communicate with each other. So we help bring all that together for them and then also help oversee that implementation of the system. So really from the beginning of that project all the way to the end, we can be their partner to a successful radio communication systems. I've been doing this for a bit over 30 years. Started quite a while ago with a really small firm who was actually called CTA, Communications Technology Associates. We were very fortunate that our firm grew, and we merged with another large A&E firm that we were partnering with. And that firm ended up merging with AECom, which is the largest, I believe, still the largest A&E firm in the world. And I was fortunate enough to be a senior vice president and lead their technology solutions division, where we again still continue to help public safety, but we also branched out into 911, doing the actual building of communication center, as well as all the technology that goes into the communication center. Had the privilege of working all over the world on different projects, and I've had the privilege of working with a lot of great people. We've had a great team surrounding us really since the beginning of my time working in public safety. And then a few years back, decided things needed to change a little bit in my life. So left AECom and decided to start CTA again. So we're a small firm, a small woman-owned firm, and started with just myself in 2017. And since then, we have grown to about 10 employees. And we've really stayed true to our passion of wanting to support local public safety. So police and fire departments figure out how they can stay connected with each other. One of the things that we really appreciate is the fact that, you know, our public safety and our first responders leave their homes every day and put their potentially their lives on the line. And what we want to do is help give them an environment, a communications environment that helps to keep them safe, so that when they need someone to help them, they can reach that radio and it will work for them. They can get back to their dispatch center and they can get to their fellow first responders that are out there and be of service. So that really is something that we take extremely seriously. We are passionate about that. So passionate, in fact, that our firm is based on the premise that all of our profits are reinvested into public safety training, as well as STEM education. We believe those are two components that are going to help our industry continue to flourish as we move forward. So that's just a little bit about me.
So let's talk a little bit about that public safety training, Cheryl. Tell us more about that.
Okay. Well, what we try to do is keep it at the local level. So we stay invested. Our firm is in Virginia. So we work very closely with the Virginia chapter of APCO, and we support the training that dispatchers may need. Also, really any training that APCO would present. Oftentimes at our state conference, which is usually in October, they will have training classes that are prior to the conference. So we will send out a notice to all of the dispatch centers, and if they have dispatchers that need the training, they'll fill out an application and we will support that training for them. We also like to do things at the local level with different dispatch centers when we hear of need. we will, partner with them and help them fulfill those training needs.
So let's go on to another topic area of your expertise, and talk about your company and your influence and participation in FirstNet. What have you done with regard to FirstNet?
Well, certainly, I am a member of the FirstNet community. We understand how very important it is to have that component that gives us that data communications throughout the country. One of the things that we do is we partner heavily with our localities to ensure that FirstNet is coming in to their locality. A lot of the clients that we work with are more rural. And of course, FirstNet, it made sense for them to start in the more urbanized area because they're able to help a greater population. But we like to work with them to ensure that they are also servicing the rural areas and putting up the towers that they need to be able to have access to the FirstNet service. We're a bit of a liaison between the localities and FirstNet to try to help make sure that we are, servicing our rural communities.
So are you working with AT&T? Are you working with PSAPs, or both?
Both, really both. We work with AT&T. We work with their representatives, depending upon who it is and what jurisdiction we're working with. And we really kind of help them figure out, not only because, of course, AT&T is also a commercial entity. So, we look at where we can partner not only with a lot of the broadband that's going on right now. We're seeing that need finally being fulfilled in a lot of the rural areas. So we work with, existing tower owners and FirstNet and the jurisdictions to see if we can't find really a common siting for towers that benefits everyone, that helps FirstNet meet their expectations of servicing rural communities. It also helps the rural communities have broadband, but then it also helps, FirstNet have a location that they can promote commercial services as well.
So we're on here tonight with Cheryl, and she's talking about her career and also her company, CTA. And I want to encourage our viewers to ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A area, and Barney Scholl will be happy to bring those up. So if you have questions for Cheryl, she has an extensive knowledge in the area of public safety. And let's talk about some of the projects that you've worked on and some of your areas of favorite expertise, Cheryl.
Oh, favorite expertise. I think the people side of it's what I really enjoy. We do a lot of projects where we do regional systems. We really help localities not only, say, in a county, pull together the different agencies, the law enforcement and fire and EMS that may have been on disparate systems, really come together and create, one ubiquitous system for the entire counties, but also help counties work together. If one jurisdiction has already put in a very robust communication system and a lot of their coverage, we know coverage doesn't stop at the border of a jurisdiction, it continues to go. And so if there's good coverage in an adjacent jurisdiction, how can we leverage that? How can we work together and create partnerships, not only that saves the jurisdictions money, but also really improves their opportunity to have a public safety grade robust system that gives them the coverage they need. So I think the people side is what I enjoy the most. We spoke of this earlier. One of the things I like to tell our clients is really oftentimes the technical side is the side that we know so well and we're so confident in because, the technology has been well developed and well implemented in so many other places. We know it's going to work. And what we have to do then is bring all of the people together and help them figure out maybe the governance side, figure out the policies and procedure side that they need to be able to work together successfully and cohesively on this new, in this new communications environment that they will embark on.
So how do you approach it when you go into a community, maybe it's a county level thing, or an area, and you got the fire department, you got the police department, you've got other public safety services like ambulance, etc., but they don't get along?
Well, that is hard. First, obviously, you go in and talk to them individually because everyone needs to be heard. But then what you do is, as you start to push out the different things that you've heard and you start to normalize it among the groups, I think they find they have more in common than they have differences. Obviously, their jobs are quite different. Their missions are implemented in different ways. But when it all comes back to the root of it all, they need to communicate. They need to be able to talk to each other. So often they honestly cannot even talk to each other or cannot talk back to dispatch, or they have that difficulty. Maybe dispatch can hear them well, but they can't hear dispatch. So what we talk about, this two-way communications, it is two-way radio for a reason. It's called that because both sides need to be able to communicate with each other. And so now we say, okay, well, once we solve that problem for you, where you can now communicate in your very specific environment, what happens when you need someone? Right? What happens when the fire department gets on scene and they need medical personnel, not only for the victims maybe of a building fire, but for their own people, right? One of their firefighters is injured. You need help. How are you going to get that help if we can't get past the part where, we're just used to being separate? You've got to come together and realize there's going to come a point in your career and in any particular scene that you're going to need someone else's help, whether it's law enforcement or EMS or fire, and you've got to be able to get to each other. And so I think once they start to realize that it really is a common problem, and then you start to explain that now the governance comes next. We'll figure out how to get everybody on the same page and know when to talk to each other and when not to, because we know we also don't want to step over each other, right, and get in each other's way. That's always a bit of a concern, but we just share with them that can be worked out. But let's understand that we do have a common mission, which is to be able to be heard and to hear others.
So Cheryl, in these communities, especially the rural communities, which, as you point out, are often left behind, do you and your company assist these emergency systems, these public safety systems, in grant writing, in procuring funding for systems?
Interestingly enough, yes, that's something that we really embarked on the last few years. We're finding that so many of those jurisdictions just do not have the means. They do not have the people, internally that have the time to do it, or really have ever done it before, which is a bit of a challenge. Sometimes grants can be a little overwhelming, when you have to figure out, all the different steps that are involved. So we found that it really is helpful if we can bring that aspect to them. So the last few years, we have several clients that, we've been able to help them secure quite a bit of funding, and it's really helped them move forward. And one of the other areas that I think partners nicely with that is being able to help them figure out, how can I get from the state I'm in today to a better state in a manner that I can financially be able to absorb it. So that comes to not just necessarily, creating a full project that's going to be done in 2 years. If they don't have that kind of money, we can help them, get grants, and we can help them phase in a project so that every phase is independent. And, when phase 1 is done, for instance, they're better off than they were at the beginning of phase 1. And it works on its own. When they get to phase 2, again, every state, they're a little bit better off. And then eventually at the end of the process, they're in the ideal environment that they need to be for good communications.
So what about EOCs and headquarters? You see so many communities that have aged systems that are really have been left behind, and they don't have the proper funding, but there's a real necessity because the systems around them have been upgraded, digital systems, encryption. Have you tackled building EOCs from the ground up?
I have. We have done that in the past. We've done that out really throughout the United States, as well as, again, overseas. So help them figure out exactly how to stand up that type of environment. A lot of times we find that it's very helpful to consider an EOC also a training facility, Again, thinking of it from a financial perspective, that's something that, helps to bring financial resources to bear. And it also helps not only the PSAP or the ECC, but it also allows you to be able to pull together that EOC. So figuring out how to blend these things together so that it's really a multi-purpose type of environment, I think helps them to get the funding that they need and be able to implement that. I think, unfortunately, what's happened in the world in the last number of years, it has forced localities and jurisdictions to understand they need a good solid EOC that is a place where they can go stand up, all the command and control that they need in the case of something that's a mass type of incident. So unfortunately, our world is showing them that they need it, but we're also helping them to understand how they can do it in a manner that's affordable and that really serves the community for more than just those particular incidents.
Great, great. Now, Barney, do we have some questions?
Make sure I guess I'm on, aren't I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one popped up here. What experiences have you had with amateur radio? What have you heard from various public safety agencies regarding their desire to work with their experiences with amateurs?
Mm-hmm. That's always interesting. We have found that oftentimes jurisdictions don't always appreciate that we have this community out there that can be so very helpful. And so a lot of times what we'll do, especially when we're dealing with that EOC component, is to help them understand that the community is there and that they need to be able to incorporate them in, because we believe they're a very valuable component, especially in an EOC environment. And so I think it's just making the connections. I find, interestingly enough, that integrating them into the EOC world is a little more prevalent from the West Coast as you come towards the middle of the country, and a little less prevalent as we move towards the East Coast. So we find it interesting to kind of bring some of that, middle America and the Western side of America experience, with amateur radio back over to the East Coast, and help them understand that it can be a very valuable component in your EOC.
So Cheryl, on just leading in on that, one of the things that we have here in Pennsylvania is that hospitals are mandated to have some sort of a backup communication system, such as amateur radio. And actually in our county, the hospitals had to purchase amateur radio equipment and then make sure that they partnered with amateur radio operators in an amateur radio club to make the communications tests, and et cetera. Have you seen that before?
I have not seen that much. No, that's quite interesting, and I applaud them for doing that. I think that's a critical component. I think, again, the value is monumental to what they can bring, and I guess I wish I saw that more.
Yeah, there is a saying in amateur radio: when all else fails.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And
that will still work.
Right. And so many times, and I know you're very aware of this, that, you have a hurricane or earthquake comes in, and what's the first thing that goes out is the cellular network.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And of course, with that, FirstNet would go down.
Yes.
As well. And no matter, how many frequencies were dedicated and all the prioritization, etc. Barney, any other questions?
Oh, I can think of a couple here, or I see a couple. You were given your interest in people and dealing with people. You mentioned earlier that you've done some projects outside the United States. Have you found any difference in people's attitude with your work inside or other countries?
Well, certainly. There's always differences, I think, when you leave your culture and your community. I know when I worked in Saudi Arabia, that was certainly very interesting. Of course, particularly being a female. So, everybody was certainly very respectful, but I think it takes just a little bit more effort to to help them understand that, you know, the information you're bringing them is something that's going to be of value to them. So once you get over that hurdle, I think it goes a little bit more smoothly, but obviously just being in a different culture, I think was so very unusual for me, but really valued the people that I met and the people that we were able to work with. And you know, I think one of the things I do find that as we venture outside of the U.S. is that things have more layers to them, is maybe the best way to say it, whether it's cultural layers or whether it's political layers. I find that I don't see that quite as much inside the United States, and maybe I just don't recognize it because I'm so accustomed to how we do things here in the U.S. But I did find that there's a lot of different layers there, and it takes a bit longer to get things accomplished when you work outside of the U.S. just to be able to get through all of those layers.
Another question, Barney.
Have you encountered friction between unionized dispatchers and electrical mechanics of the EOC and non-unionized ham radio operators?
I think there's always a bit of conflict when you have union and non-union, certainly. That's one of the areas I think is generally the most challenging when we go in and are working with, especially we've seen that more so in consolidation studies. I've had the privilege of working with a great team over the years. I know one of your members, Nate McClure, was a member of our team, working with helping dispatch centers in jurisdictions figure out if they can consolidate, bring together multiple jurisdictions. And that does get extremely challenging when you're dealing with unionized versus non-union, trying to figure out, where we draw the lines and, whose rules apply, and, pay certainly is different, and all of the different expectations are different. So it certainly can be a very challenging environment.
Another question, Barney.
There's a comment. I'll make a comment first, and I'll go on to a question. It popped up that Oakland County in Michigan has had ham radio in every hospital in the county for over 15 years. Mm-hmm. So it is going on in other places in the mm-hmm. country. But That's to the question, and this may go into what you had talked about, your support of training. Can you speak to the need for law enforcement, fire, and EMS to learn how to use their radios?
Yes. And it's interesting because they spend a lot of time, law enforcement spending a lot of time learning how to fire, to shoot a firearm. That's very important. Fire, they spend a lot of time figuring out all the equipment on their apparatus, and EMS, the training that they have to go through is just monumental. I'm on the board of a volunteer rescue squad here locally, so I'm just constantly amazed at what an EMT has to go through to be trained. So, they understand training, and they expect to have a lot of training, but then you hand them a radio and say, oh, this looks like a walkie-talkie. This is kind of no big deal. I just push a button and talk. Well, yes, ideally you push the button and you talk, but there are a lot of other things that go on with that unit. And now they're getting more and more like our cell phones, right? They have so much software in them. They have so many buttons and so many things you can do. That training piece is critical. I know when we do our projects, that's a really big and important component, and we don't allow that to get shortchanged in the process. Oftentimes we'll find a project, if for any reason it's slowed down, in the implementation, and people have made a promise that it'll be done on this date, right? And then it starts to get political, and then they want to start rushing through the testing and then rushing through the training. And we try to help them to understand, what, if on day one, people don't know how to use the system, and they're automatically going to say it doesn't work. And it doesn't matter if it actually works, and it's them that don't know how to use that radio. So we try to help them really understand how critical it is, but also on the other side, helping our vendor community understand that, they need to provide good training. They need to provide online training, and it needs to be training that's there and available to the clients ongoing. So it's not just a one-time training. People can go back and get refreshers, and then they forget about, you're going to hire new people, probably pretty quickly. So they need to keep that as an ongoing training, and we're really encouraging people to incorporate, a refresher on their radios every time they go into a training session, whether it's every couple of years or whatever the norm is for that agency.
Now I know why you have that psychology degree. Because all of this stuff makes sense, and it's much better than being an engineer when you're having to explain these things. Barney, another question.
Yes. Just thinking about how much technology has changed over the last even 5 years, do you have any perspective of what how it's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years for public safety?
Wow. Well, I think what we're going to see is a bit of a challenge. I think for public safety on the radio side, we're going to see things more similar to what we're seeing on the dispatch side, which is the next gen 911, and things maybe moving more towards that cloud environment. I know it's been a big adjustment for us to go to circuit-based, right, to IP, but I think we're going to start to see our vendor community want to do more service-oriented, so cloud services and things of that nature. So that's going to be a big adjustment, I think, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge because a lot of the people that we serve, they want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to know it's there, they want to know the redundancies in place, they want to know that it's going to work, every single time that they key up. And I think maybe losing some of that control, over to the vendor community and more of a cloud base is going to be a bit of a challenge for them. So it'll be interesting to me to see if it is adopted, and how hard our vendor community pushes for that and how quickly.
Another question, Barney?
Yes, one that came up is in particular, you talked about investing in training and STEM.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some examples of things that, especially in the STEM area, I'm wondering what specifics you've worked with?
Well, that started probably 25 years ago, where we started taking interns from our local governor's school. That's where, kids kind of spend part of their day in the regular school and the other part really doing STEM education. Our governor here in Virginia created that in just about all of the public schools. And so I'm on the board of a technology council here regionally. And so we took it another step and we developed a STEM academy a number of years back. So this is an academy where kids can go and basically they can either take all of their classes in this environment. We partner with the local community college, or they can spend part of their day in their local high school and part of their day in the STEM academy. And it's really one of the lines that we've developed there is for wireless communications, because of course that's our passion. We also do healthcare and mechatronics, but we really feel like this gives kids that opportunity to get steeped into the STEM education and figure out, is this right for them? Sometimes it's not, but most of the time it is. And it really helps give them a jump start to going to a college and being successful in the technology fields and the science and engineering fields, which we again believe is so very important. We started to see a drop off in that, I think, over the years. And one of the areas we've been successful in finding good engineering talent is in our local colleges. And I think kids are more successful in college when they've had that background in high school. And then if they've had internships, right, with local businesses that continue to foster those STEM components. And then, you can bring them in and you can nurture them and help train them, and they become wonderful engineers for you.
Another question, Barney.
Yeah, a question popped up here about how long does it take for a typical radio upgrade project?
So for a standard county, which, might be anywhere from 4 to 8 sites, you can have that done, fully implemented in 18 to 24 months. Your vendor has to be motivated, and you need a good consultant to make sure everything's keeps moving forward as it should. But generally 2 years is an adequate time frame.
Another question, Barney?
Well, they're a little bit slow to pop up tonight, but
Okay, well, I can go into a couple other topic areas. We are encouraging all the viewers here tonight that have logged in, and we thank all of you for being here, to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and Barney will get those to Cheryl. And we're having a good time here with public safety, and we're talking about build outs and talking about EOCs. And so in these rural areas, Cheryl, that are underserved, underbuilt, underfunded, you know, and I think you have a lot of public safety people that are frustrated, you know, that they're kind of left behind. How do you work with FirstNet, AT&T, and entice them to come into a rural community and bring them up to speed?
I think probably the most successful way to begin that process is to really work with the SAIC and the SWIC. So that in every state, to my knowledge, some are more active than others, has a SWIC. So that's someone who is basically the interoperability person for that state, and they should be the single point of contact with AT&T. So I think making them aware of the situation. I know that's something we've been doing here in Virginia. A number of the rural localities had never even met, you know, our SWIC as of a few years ago. And so we've really tried to promote that and encourage them to go out and visit the different jurisdictions and really make that connection, because that really needs to be the place that they begin. It's interesting in Virginia that we're very diverse. We have, you know, Northern Virginia, that's a lot of very populated, very wealthy counties. Then we go over to our eastern coast, which is the Hampton Roads area. And again, very populated. It's actually a designated UASI, so they get funding, you know, at that UASI level as well. And then you start to move towards the central part, and we have some larger communities, some smaller. You move out to the west and they're extremely rural, you know, much smaller jurisdictions. And so really encouraging, you know, anytime that we get a new SWIC, we try to encourage them to, you know, take some road trips, get out and meet the different localities, because it's really not one size fits all. And, you know, really every state that I've been in, you see some version of that, right? That, you know, there's a very diverse group of jurisdictions, how they're made up, the number of people they have, which directly relates to what kind of revenue stream they have, and they can reinvest in their infrastructure.
Barney, another question.
The question came up: how far does the healthcare education go in the STEM high school programs?
It's interesting. Our local STEM, they have a very robust healthcare. As a matter of fact, it's one of the more popular lines that we have. But probably about half of our students, maybe a little bit more, take that particular track, the healthcare. So we partner heavily with our local hospital, and they take in all of the interns every year. So they get to basically shadow and work with probably 8 to 10 different departments within our hospital community. So I think for us anyway, it's a very robust relationship.
Another question, Barney.
I'm following a little bit more on that. You've said that this STEM education has gone on for a number of years. How do you determine, or have you altered the content or the fields over time? Do you listen to local businesses, local community as to what is most important, and have you tried to fit into those categories?
Absolutely, we do. We have we have a STEM advisory board where we have obviously all of the educational components, but we have a lot of businesses that are involved. As a matter of fact, business contribution is what helped us build this academy and put all of the equipment in it. So that's a vital piece, vital component of the success of the academy. Interestingly enough, we did just start a new track, which is for cybersecurity. And so one of our local businesses supported by putting in some money for scholarships. And so now we have a cybersecurity track. So that's fairly new, just in the last couple of years. So we are constantly listening to what our community needs, because one of the things that we have here locally is we have a lot of colleges. And so we have a lot of smart kids, but those kids come, get educated, and leave. We want to keep some of the smart kids, in our community, continuing to, help our community grow and thrive. So, listening to what our businesses need is a critical piece.
Another question, Barney.
Have you had to explain why a public safety radio has to cost so much more than a ham radio? And
Sure. And that's a great question for our vendor community. They are extremely expensive. I will say the advent of P25, which is a standards base, is helping that, we believe. It's helping to drive some of the prices down. Obviously, competition, we're starting to see more competition, especially on the subscriber or the radio side. So that helps to bring the cost down. But they are very expensive units. They, part of that is because they're what we call public safety grade. So they're expected to have a long lifespan, and it's a lifespan that in many cases, they don't get treated very well in the environment that they're in, especially the portable units. Sometimes the mobile units do a little bit better than the portable units, but they're in very tough environments. And I think that just for them to be able to withstand the treatment that they endure day in and day out, they've had to make them more rugged, which of course adds to the cost.
Another question, Barney.
Is there a lifespan, or I had a conversation this morning about a computer person. They're saying, oh, to replace computers every 5 years. Mm-hmm. Is there any standard, or what is the pattern in literally overhauling of a public service system?
Okay, the system itself and infrastructure, we designed them to last 15 years. We say 15 to 20 years. 15 is a good lifespan. I will say that's for major components. The other thing that we have to remember, as I mentioned earlier, we've gone from circuit-based to IP, so there's a lot of software. You have to keep that software up to date. You have to do refreshes and things of that nature, but your actual, the major components of your system should withstand a life of 15 years.
Another question, Barney.
Going back to I guess to the second part of the previous question, and I think what it was directed more towards public safety that are based with volunteers, such as fire departments. Is there other than what you'd said before, is there any more of an answer that you would give to the volunteers who may often be paying the radios out of their own pocket?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. And again, being on the board of a volunteer rescue squad, we certainly know firsthand that challenge. We really do try to work with the community to appreciate the fact that when you're putting in a new system that, you need to be all inclusive. And especially if it's something that you're going to bond over a period of time, at a bare minimum, you should, try to be able to fund everyone having a radio up front. We know that people will then have to start working in, as they hire people into their capital budgets, being able to purchase new radios. But that's sort of our first line of defense. We do look at different tiers of radio. We look at different ways that volunteers can maybe buy what we call a lower tier of radio. It doesn't have to have every single bell and whistle. It just needs to be a unit that they can hear and communicate with. We also, I think that again, the advent of P25, our P25 pagers have come a long way, and that's a far less costly unit than even a portable radio for a volunteer person to have. And some of these even have the ability to be able to respond and mark up. that they're en route to a particular scene. So, we're trying to work hard to give them different layers of opportunity to be able to buy equipment that's not, quite as expensive.
So another question, Barney.
The next question is a longer statement, but with a opinion at the end. When each state opted in to implement FirstNet, there should be a contract between the state and FirstNet spelling out the infrastructure and the sequence and time for that coverage build out. Consultants such as you can be an advocate and SME for a rural community where AT&T FirstNet may not yet fulfill their obligation. And the state POC has not held their feet to the fire. Do you agree?
I do agree. And interestingly enough, over the last, I guess the last 5 years, I've been fortunate enough to be on a panel talking about your contract with FirstNet, having some people, generally I'd have someone from the East Coast and someone from the West Coast, just really talk people through their experience with negotiating that contract with FirstNet, because it is negotiable. I think oftentimes our jurisdictions feel like it's not negotiable. And everybody who wants you to sign a contract will come in with that, right? Because that's the path of least resistance. Just take my contract, sign it, and we'll move on. But you really do need to read it, and you need to make it personal to you. It is in fact negotiable. It is something that, if you have the right wording in there, you can hold their feet to the fire. But sometimes it does take someone who's been through it before to kind of help you get there.
Another question, Barney.
And maybe you know the answer to this. I wonder how broadly has the rollout of FirstNet been, at least in your area that you're familiar with? Is it, I'm sure it could be answered geographically or population-wise.
Well, I think it just kind of varies depending on where you are in the country, right? We've seen it certainly in Virginia. It's very heavily built out up in the Northern Virginia area, in the DC and the Maryland area. It's interestingly enough, I think it has more to do with, where AT&T had their existing sites, right? That's clearly the areas that they're going to start with. It's starting to build out towards the eastern coast here in Virginia. It's been quite slow, I think, to get to Central Virginia, and Western Virginia, it's not doing much yet. But if you look at the contract with between AT&T and the federal government, they recognize that, right? They recognized how they needed to build it out in layers, and we knew that the urban areas would certainly become first. And that made sense. They were supposed to layer in more rural areas. I think that that's been a little slower than we expected. So hopefully that'll pick up. I'm sure COVID hasn't helped any of that, right? With getting sites implemented and getting things up and running. But our hope is certainly that they will keep moving forward at a good solid pace and make sure that they do meet the obligations of serving our rural communities.
And we encourage you to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A here. We still have a little bit of time left with Cheryl. And Barney, another question.
Yes. What would you recommend if someone, a youngster, someone in high school, wanted to get into this field and they didn't happen to live in your area where there was a STEM program? Do you have any recommendations for people or younger people, how they might learn more about it and get into this field?
Sure. I think, I think people will be surprised. A lot of high schools now are moving more towards having programs like this. I think that you'll see, certainly there's a lot of high schools have these college programs where they can partner with community colleges. A lot of our community college institutions have certainly technical fields in them where a student can, finish their high school education and then, of course, have an associate's degree basically when they leave high school. So they can certainly look at the community college and see if that's something that's of help to them. I think most areas, believe it or not, do have technology councils. I think that's kind of a well-kept secret. That's always a place that any student can go and try to get that level of just information and that level of connection. We're finding that a lot of high schools are starting to implement internships, which is something that we think is extremely valuable. That's something they really learned from the college level to bring it back down to the high school level. And I think, then it's kind of incumbent upon the student, right? If they have an internship opportunity, pick the company that really speaks to you, if it's a more technical field. So I think there's a lot of different avenues that students can really embark on.
Cheryl, one thing that has crossed my mind, let's go back to radio manufacturers and vendors. The process of how do you and your company approach integration of equipment that is made outside of the United States?
I will say that a lot of our clients have clauses in their contracts that they're very careful about the equipment that they purchase. And so very often it really limits the vendor community to equipment that has been, purchased here through the US, and it's generally US technology. I will say that in certain components will come from other countries, but again, it's really flowed through a US corporation.
For instance, are you doing consulting work that includes equipment that's manufactured in China?
We are not currently, no.
Okay. Barney, back to you.
Well, there was a statement here, and I guess I'll ask what your opinion of it is. The comment is, for young people to get into emergency communications, a very good start is to get their amateur radio license.
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely true. I think that's just sometimes a little daunting. And the reason I say that is because my granddaughter, who did go through the STEM Academy here locally and ended up at VMI, which is a military college here in Virginia, and she went into the National Guard, and she is currently doing Signal Corps training. And so we've been talking about this ham license, and even she at this point is a little overwhelmed with that. But I think, I think our ham clubs maybe need to get out there a little bit more and maybe start to integrate with technology councils and with, STEM academies, if there is one in your local area, because I think that's extremely valuable, but I'm not sure kids know where to start when it comes to that.
Okay, another question, Barney.
Okay, I'm trying to read this question and fully understand it. WRT to traditional APCO P25 radio systems is everything in the state interoperability on arrival. As mutual aid at any instant, given the variety of trunking systems and encryption available on the market and likely used differently as various local jurisdictions.
Well, that's a mouthful. I think maybe the heart of that question, and I could be wrong, is that, P25, it is certainly standards based, and that is helping us get to an environment where two different jurisdictions that have, vendor A and vendor B technology, but they're both P25, they should be able to interoperate together. And so, yes, when both systems are fully implemented, once they start to, work with each other, and they can program, if they're in the same band, they can program each other's frequencies, into their radios, and they can set up talk groups and things of that nature. They can certainly, interoperate on day one. Again, part of that, you have to go back to governance, right? There have to be MOUs in place and agreements and things of that nature. I think where you have to exercise a bit of caution, even on the P25 standards base, is that there are features that one group can implement that makes them less interoperable, even if they both have P25 systems. And one of those is encryption that you just mentioned. If both entities use AES encryption, that is a standards-based encryption. Our vendor community does also still have proprietary encryption, which is a lot less expensive. So now we go back to that tug, right, of finances versus, full standards. So, money kind of always comes into play, no matter what our decision is, whether it's for a system, whether it's for a feature, whether it's for a particular type of radio. So, you have to carefully weigh the decisions you make. They can't all just be financial, but you have to also think about, is this going to help or hurt interoperability a little bit further down the line? So there's a lot of choices to make.
Barney?
There was a slight I guess a typo on that question. The correction comes across a little bit differently. I think they were referring as much to traditional and radio interoperability, not necessarily within different technologies.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand that question.
How about another question?
Okay,
Barney?
Okay, the person is still adding. I gather the answer is no, not on arrival. Even P25 needs the standard programming for any given incident.
Well, not that. Okay, okay, I think I understand. Not on arrival. Well, I think anything takes planning, right? Any system you put in takes planning. It's going to take that planning within your system, right, to have different agencies be able to talk together, and certainly will take that planning outside of your system to have two systems work together. And a lot of that happens in the area that we call fleet mapping. That's where we figure out who needs to talk to whom, and we set up, if it's a trunking system, we set up talk groups and we start to program them together. So there's a lot of planning that goes into a successful implementation, not only, again, internally, so that all of your agencies can talk to each other when they need to. And the key there is when they need to. Not everybody needs to talk to everybody all the time. There are specific instances where they do, and so you program that accordingly. So that programming would also have to take place between, external agencies and jurisdictions.
Another question, Barney.
Yeah, how have you been able to get into a high school facility to provide STEM as an outsider? Can you speak a bit more about the concept of a STEM academy and where this physically happens?
Okay, so how we did it locally, and that's certainly what I can speak to, is we worked with all of the public school entities around us in our particular region. We came to an agreement, and we also worked with the local community college. So that was sort of our ecosystem there, and of course bringing in the partners from the different businesses. But we agreed on a curriculum. We agreed to house it at the local community college. We were actually able to build a facility, again, with the partnerships from the local community and several large corporations that helped to fund that. So it's housed physically at the community college. The kids, again, they're given transportation from their local school to the STEM Academy at the college to take their classes. They again, can do part-time at their high school. They can do the other part-time at our academy there at the college. Or if they want to, they can actually take college classes and spend their whole day at the college. They would spend part of their time in our STEM Academy and the other part, actually taking college classes with the local community college.
And the STEM classes would count towards the high school requirements?
Yes, it fulfills both high school and college. We actually have college professors that are teaching our STEM classes.
So they can get some college credit for the STEM classes also?
They do. They would, if they choose not to go full-time to the community college, they would end up with certificates. So they would, of course, graduate as a high school graduate. So they fulfilled all those credits, but they would end up with, depending upon the track that they've taken, they would end up with certifications. Or if they took, a higher level of classes, they could end up with an associate's degree.
Is there any employment process as part of that STEM program?
We have a very strong internship. It's a requirement in their senior year. And we find quite often about 75 to 80% of our kids go on to colleges, whether it's the community college or to four-year institutions. The others really step right into a job, most likely with the company that they held their internship.
And Barney, we have time for one more question.
Okay, Cheryl, you might want to talk a bit about NIFOG as related to interoperability channels when various outside departments come together at an instant?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is the NIFOG. What this is really basically a field operations guide that's been developed. And it's something that can be used really universally across the country. And so we have particular channels that are considered national interoperability channels. And the key there is for jurisdictions and localities to understand that they need to be programmed into their radios. And so once they are programmed into the radios, no matter where they go, they can use those particular channels to basically interoperate or talk with the other jurisdictions. And we find that's particularly helpful because, you know, you hear so often about a major incident and then people coming in from the outside to help. Well, so what do you do then, right? You've got all of these people coming in to help. How do they talk to each other? Well, you might have a cache of radios that you can start to hand out, but ideally, if everybody's using this type, you know, they're adhering to the NIFOG and they've implemented that, they can then come into the jurisdiction. Then jurisdiction can decide, you know, from a command and control perspective, you know, what frequencies they're going to use, and then everybody gets on that, and now you've got really a wonderful and interoperable situation here that is already pre-described and, you know, written out for us and hopefully programmed into our radios. So it makes us immediately interoperable.
So Cheryl, if somebody would like to contact you directly, either to ask questions or to have your company get involved with a project, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, they're more than welcome to email me. My email is my last name, Giggetts, at cta-c.com. They could go to our website, which is www.cta-c.com. Or, you know, I can provide information to you, Tim, and they can give us a call.
Okay, well, that would be great. And thank you so much, Cheryl, for coming on tonight. This has been great. The interaction with the participants was really good. And I want to thank Barney Scholl for his help here, as well as the rest of the Radio Club of America members. This was a Radio Club of America interview event. We do have the interview events on the even months. During the odd months, we have a networking event that is only available to RCA members. And if you're not an RCA member, please go to the radioclubofamerica.org website and apply for membership. Get involved. This is a great group of wireless professionals, and I think you'll find a home here and a real value in membership. So thanks again, Cheryl.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone.
Okay, and so on behalf of the Radio Club of America, this is Tim Duffy saying good night and hope everybody had fun, and we'll see you next time here in September. It will be the networking series. So good night from Western Pennsylvania.